Just waiting for that recording to get started, and let me share. Okay. There we go. So the recording will start in just a minute or so. That's taken a second to initialize, but we're here. We're in our course. You had your first week, which was a relatively light week, just some basic introductory things. Hopefully that kind of got you started on things. We will fix this. Webinar 3 obviously was not on June 20th. That will actually be on June 29th. So I will fix that. And then we don't have a June 23rd, 22nd, 3rd there. So I'll fix that one as well. You can tell when I'm typing too quickly and I get a little off track there. Let's see. Scrolling on down, we had tons of activity in that get to know one another forum, which was fantastic. I really loved seeing people's book recommendations and the best piece of advice that they've ever received. That has been a lot of fun for me to look at. We also did a feedback activity. That was the first thing we had in here, is that feedback activity, where we asked you to tell us a bit about your background and your Moodle experience. And one of the reasons we like to open with that feedback activity is because one of the questions that often comes up is there a way for me to get information from people that's not graded? I don't want to use an assignment and a form isn't what I'm looking for. We use the feedback activity pretty regularly here. It's a really nice activity if we're trying to do like a course evaluation or just some quick questions to kind of get a temperature check of where things are in a course. There are lots of different question types you can use in feedback. Some that we use are multiple choice. You can rate things. There's also some short and longer text answer questions you could put in there. So if you just want to be gathering feedback from people, you can do that there. We then had a page, and that page was the introduction to Moodle. And what you're probably starting to notice is that we have different icons for different activities. Now, depending on your site, they may look just a little bit different. Some of these icons, what they display, the icon that's displayed is kind of theme dependent or site dependent. But what you should be picking up on now as we go through is that each activity has its own unique icon. And that can be helpful as we start going through and getting used to being in the platform, and our learners get used to it because they start to realize, oh, anything that looks like this square with an arrow, that means that I'm going to be telling them something. And if it's just this thing that looks like a piece of paper, I'm going to be reading something. So you'll start to see that here. We use the H5P activity to create a Moodle terminology slideshow there to kind of get you used to some of the more common Moodle jargon that's used. I know when I very first started working with Moodle, people were talking about things like LTIs and plugins, and it took a little bit to figure out exactly what people were talking about. And so we tried to brainstorm, Michael and I, what were some of those things that the first time you heard them, you just had to immediately Google so that you knew what was going on. Those were some of the things that we put in there. Also, if you're coming from other platforms, sometimes things like the topics in a course are called folders. And so it's good to know that they're a topic in Moodle, and that just can kind of help, especially as you are talking to people and you might be learning a little bit more about support and questions that you can ask. Then we had a book, Navigating the Site and Courses. And as you're going to see this week, I really love the book activity. You're going to have a couple of them this week. I find it a really nice way to put lots of information into the course, but just have one entry on that course page. Those books are set up like ebooks, and you can navigate right through them, going from chapter to chapter. And what you'll start to notice this week is we even use sub-chapters. And I'll show that in just a minute. And then, of course, we had our Get to Know One Another forum. Opening today is the course setup, settings, and activities and more area. Now, I know we've gone through a bit of course setup, but again, I created a book for this. And here you'll see that we get into those course settings and what they control. And then we have a section all about course formats. And these are our subtopics in there. So there are different course formats. This particular course is using the topics format, and you'll see that we've created subchapters for some different ones. And in the topics one, I didn't put a picture because it's exactly what we're working on now. But there are others such as tiles. So the tiles format, you have some setup that can go in there. You can pick the icon and colors, and then it looks like this. We do have a note in here. Make sure that you understand that there is one accessibility problem with tiles, and that is if you are using keyboard only navigation, you can get into the tile, which shows all of the weak stuff, but you can't get back out for some reason. And we're hoping the developer is working on that. It's something that many people have reported to the person who develops the tiles format. So we're hoping that that gets picked up and they can fix that. Seems like it would be an easy fix since all of the rest of tiles is actually keyboard navigable. Another course format is the buttons format. And there are actually a lot of settings to set up buttons. I didn't change any of them. I left them all exactly as you see them on the screen, the default. And I ended up with this. So instead of the topics being laid out one after the other, they're actually a little button at the top. And what you see in the button and what the hover text looks like, you kind of determine in those settings. But as I click on a topic, the topic number, the button for that topic, it automatically opens. And this video will show you how that works. Buttons is another popular format that people like to use to keep that course looking clean. Next, we have collapsed topics. And Michael has mentioned collapsed topics before. This is one that he favors. I'm a little less only because probably one of my most difficult clients who has the hardest things that break on their course uses collapsed topics. So by association, I immediately am like, oh no, collapsed topics. But what we'll see here is that there are many settings that can affect what the collapsed topics look like. So as you look at this, you're thinking, I can't even read the topic tabs here. And so in this video, I talk a little bit about how that happens. Had I picked a different course to actually make this this demo video for, it would look differently. But because I have the course colors already in there, but I can change the background color, the hover text. But basically what happens is when someone clicks the little arrow here next to the topic name, the topic expands. So it's a little bit like an accordion. And so in this video, I'll go through that. I'll show you where you change some of those different formats. You have access to all of these course formats in your Sandbox site. So if you've requested that Sandbox course here on the site, you can go into settings and you can actually, oh, you haven't gotten one yet, Nesreen? I'll check into that. You can go in and change the settings, and then you can change the course format or anything else you want in your course settings. Following our breadcrumb trail and coming back out to our topic for the week, you can see our next thing that we have, too far, here we are, is creating a learning environment. Now, this is a topic that we actually cover on our training menu, so we tried to think of some of the things we talk about here. And when we have the course already, we then need to create the learning environment. So how do we make this a place that people come and learn? And part of that is to add things like assignments, forums, labels, files, URLs, and you'll see that we have all of the information about that here. Assignments is a bit of a lengthy video. It's about 16 minutes. So when you go in there to watch that, just know that you can watch it, come back and watch it. But I went through each of the individual settings and assignment. That's what setting up an assignment is. Under forums, I broke this down, and these are images for creating forums and how to manage them and things. Lesson walks you through what lesson is and then some ideas for why you might use lesson. Types of pages that you can have in a lesson activity, the settings, and how to add those different pages. We then went into some resources such as putting a URL or a link in and using the book resource. And finally, we talk about how to make your life a little bit easier by duplicating content. Often when I'm using an assignment or a quiz, and I just go in and I add it from the activity chooser and I set all the settings, I know those are the same settings I want to use for each activity. So every assignment or every quiz in my course, even though I haven't added questions yet, I can do those basic settings and create that quiz shell and then just duplicate it so that I don't have to keep recreating that quiz. I really only have to make it once. And we'll show you how to duplicate that content here, and then also how to use the import feature. So a lot of times I'll have an introduction to my courses, and I might build it out in course A, but I want to use the same thing in courses B and C. I can use the import feature to be able to bring that content from course A over to B and C. Other ways that I use the import option is if I've created a course and I'm running it here in the springtime, and then I'm going to create a new course shell and run the same course in the fall. I can import all of that content over so that I don't have to worry about recreating anything. And that's what the import feature does for you. Also, in this week, we'll get into activity and course completion. So, this is a lesson. That's what this icon stands for. So, this lesson will walk you through how to set up activity completion and then how to view and track activity and course completion. So, this is some of your introductory reporting that you can look at in a course to see who's completed things, whether or not the course has been completed. And this will also tell you how to set some of that up. We then have some example lessons here. So we have a Jack and the Beanstalk and a Can You Make a Revolution lesson that you're welcome to go through and see the different ways that you might use a lesson. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about wikis this week. So a wiki is really very similar to like Wikipedia. You can have a collaborative wiki where you can create a collaborative group workspace or individual wikis where I, as a student, can write down things and only myself and the teacher can see what's in that wiki. This is a nice way if you want to create a bit of a journal or an ongoing dialogue between you and different students. You can do that using wiki. So that's what we're going to cover in this upcoming week. I also wanted to take this time to give a little introduction to something called H5P. Now, being new to Moodle, you're probably already thinking like there's already so many activities and things in here that I need to work on. But I think knowing about H5P can help you choose the direction you want to go in. So we're going to bring up the H5P website here. And actually, I have an H5P creator course. So we'll actually just skip right out of that and go into the course. So I don't even have to show you the website. So we recently ran this H5P creator course, and I would definitely say that if you're brand new to Moodle, this is something that you want to take after you get a little bit of footing under you in Moodle. But as you're starting out, and since you have your sandbox courses here on the site, you might as well play around with H5P. There we go. My internet could not move any slower today if I tried to make it. So here we are in our H5P creator course. Now, H5P at a glance. So really, what is H5P? It is it's a rich content authoring tool. It's free. It's easy to use. It's easy to use once you get past the initial first one or two times of using it, because what you find is that regardless of content type, things are pretty much templated out. Some sites are using the H5P plugin, which you can tell if when you turn your editing on and you go to your activity chooser, you see a black H5P icon. Other sites are using the content bank, and you can tell if you're doing that if you have content bank available in your left-hand navigation drawer. Usually has a little paintbrush as its icon. Or if you go to the activity chooser and choose to add an activity and see a blue H5P icon. So really, what does any of this actually mean? Let's look at what some of the content types are. So we may be thinking, okay, we've been using slide decks, so what can we do, that's different, something different than a slide deck? We can create basically the equivalent of a slide deck using something called course presentation. And what you see here is that I have my branded slide deck, and I've just imported the images in here. And I can navigate through. H5P does display a little bit large on the screen, so sometimes it's a little strange as you go through. I've added text elements here. More as I go through. And then I have these interactions. I can test my knowledge. This one is a button over here on the side. And with the button, if I click this, the question pops up for the learner. And so they have to answer this question. And then they can check whether or not they have it correct. I've left specific feedback here so you can pre-program all this feedback. So what the difference here is if I'm a student and I'm using a PowerPoint and I'm going through this PowerPoint, even if I have question slides as the teacher, there's no feedback as a student answers those, and there's not really a way for them to interact with me and for me to see that. Using the course presentation, I can take all of those things I have in PowerPoint, add questions, and then add interactions. I can see the progress that people make, and I can leave this detailed feedback for people. So as they're going through, they're actually feeling like someone's engaging with them. And you can see at the bottom, I have this little toolbar here, this navigation bar. Any bar that has a circle in the middle means it has a question there. Um, let's see. Flipped classroom is best described as an environment where, let's go with this one. There we go. And we see that we had it correct. And we can keep navigating through. All right. And when I come to the end, I can see a summary. So I see every slide that had a question, how I did with that, what my total score is. I can choose to show the solutions or retry. As the teacher or administrator, you'll actually have some advanced statistics that you can look at. So when I'm in here, I can see that there have been 106 attempts on this. This last course that we ran had 75 people in it. So 106 sounds about right. And as I go through, I can see who has attempted, when, and what their scores were. And I can see that our two supervisors, Claire and Courtney, did not attempt our H5P, so there are no scores. Or they may have attempted it, but because they're admins, that won't show here. So that's one thing that you can use H5P for when it comes to creating something that's a little bit more interactive than a traditional slide deck. I'm not going to get into branching scenario here because that is really one of the most advanced H5P content types. But as you start exploring H5P, should you want to know more about branching scenario, we are happy to answer that for you. But one of my other favorite features in H5P, and there are many, is drag and drop. So I can create a drag and drop activity where I'm dragging different things around, where I'm dragging words into a passage. And when I'm doing that, I'm able to create a more interactive opportunity here. This particular one is a drag and drop matching activity. And so I have definitions here, and then these are called drop zones. And these down here can just be dragged into wherever they want. So I can actually, it's the same. So whether I do a matching, a fill in the blank, a drag and drop onto an image, whatever I'm doing, I set it up all the same. I choose what type of activity I want people to have. So like if I just drag them in, I can drag them into the different areas here. Let's see. Can't get that in there. Oh, it goes up here. Accounts receivable and there. And then I've added all of my things in. I can check the answers to see if they're correct. Tells me all of them are wrong. That's actually not true. This is a problem that we're having with this particular drag and drop. But basically, I can drag everything into where I want it to be. And you can see it still gave me all the points. We're having some sort of problem with this one. But if I wanted to, I could retry the activity and it will put everything back where it had been. Drag and drop is something that I do really enjoy. I also like to use it when I want my learners to put things in sequence, so in order. And this is another example of that. In this one, we have all of the Star Wars films, and they have them here on the left, and they have to put them in the correct sequence here just by dragging and dropping. So while we gave some examples here, like obviously probably we're not teaching a course where we need people to put Star Wars things in order, but there are many things where we need to teach the sequence of something. So whether that's a historical event or how would you proceed in this particular interaction, we can do that through a drag and drop. There are just so many different H5P activity types. One of the things I often tell people to do is come on out here to the h5p.org website, because here H5P has actually built an example for every one of their content types. Free to use this site. You can come here and wander around. You can build things in your course here on the site. I'll show you how in a minute. But if you want to look at some of those examples and downloads, you just click along the top here for examples and downloads. Then you can come down and find something that looks interesting to you, and you can click on it and see what the example is. So let's click on these dialogue cards. So here it says learn Spanish berry names, and it says the berry names are presented in Spanish. You can turn the cards to see the correct English translations. So I can both listen to the pronunciation, read it, and then turn it over to see the English version. So as you can see, there are lots of different options here for how to use H5P. And there are a lot of different content types. So this website will give you all kinds of information to come on out here. And as Michael said, you don't need an H5P account. Some people who don't have the ability to build H5P in their particular learning management system would need to sign up for one. You don't, because you can create H5P by doing this. You're in your course. You will click to open the navigation drawer. Scroll on down until you see Content Bank and click that. The first time you come in, you will likely not see anything here. I'll see several things because we've already built things here. But you would just click this Add button right up here in the upper right side. And when you do, all of the content types will open in a drop-down, and you can just find the one you want to create. And when you click that, the editing screen will automatically open. You'll see that there are prompts for almost everything to tell you what to do. So if this is dialogue cards, I can choose the mode. And do I want it to be normal, or do I want to repeat through the stack of cards? I can create a task description. And then this tells you what's the hint for the first part of the dialogue. So what's on the front of the card? What's the answer that goes on the back? Do you want to add an image? Almost all of the H5P types lay out very similarly to this as you create them. And they all have these really nice prompts here to help you along as you're trying to figure out what goes in these places. One thing I'll say, don't bother looking at the text overrides and translations tab unless you are looking to translate the what we call hard-coded language into another language. It won't translate your content, but it will translate things like the text for the turn button. All of this would get translated into whatever language you chose. So we don't really use that too often unless we are looking to translate the entire activity. So that's how you would create H5P. Into your course, open your navigation drawer, scroll down to Content Bank, click Add, and then go wild. Pick out and create whatever you want. At the end of this course, you'll have the opportunity to download those H5P package types if you want to just take those, or to take a backup and download the whole course that you create here and take it with you to upload on your own site. Looking ahead to what we're going to do in next week's webinar, next week we'll start talking about organizing the course so that it has a nice visual appeal, assessment, so the different assessment options, including quiz. We'll talk about more about gradebook in next week, and we'll also get into those advanced grading methods that you're going to hear me chat a little bit about today in some of the videos, called rubric and grading guide. And then we'll also wrap next week with information on accessibility and universal design for learning. And what we'll bring into the accessibility piece are things like, is there an accessible equation editor for Moodle? And the answer to that is yes. And we'll talk about bringing images in and how to format your text and things like that. So we can do all of those different things, and we'll cover all of those for next week. And we'll also introduce you to what will be happening in the capstone project. Don't worry, it's not a huge project. We just ask you to take the information that you're learning in this course and create something on the site. So it can be an activity of your choosing. Really, we just want to know that when you're walking away, you're feeling more comfortable in using Moodle. And then as we get down to the very bottom there, we'll have our conclusion, and that will be the end for this particular course. So next week will be our final webinar. After our final webinar, the course does stay open for 30 days so that you can continue to go through and do some different work and things. I would also expect, in addition to the capstone next week, we'll also have probably a forum or a wiki, some place where we can start to collect some of your questions that may not have been answered in the course, so that we can create one final deliverable for you that has answers to those questions, so you have something to sort of take away with you. And that's what we have for this week's webinar. Are there any questions? Stacy, yes, I do have time to meet at the end of this. I do have a training at 2, but I have time in between. Any other questions we can answer for you today?
Saw Christine put a hand up. and then Nesreen as well.
Yes. So for the course formats, on your dashboard, is it possible to do the topics format, or does it have to stay? Because ours has the tiles, and I didn't know if we could change it on our dashboard.
So what you see on your dashboard's not your course format. That's actually dashboard formatting, and that is perfectly accessible, but that stays the way that it is.
Okay, so that one, okay,
Yep,
thank you.
that's okay. Yeah, it looks exactly like tiles formatting
Mhm.
for a course, but the dashboard is actually programmed completely differently and fully keyboard navigable.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. That's a great question. All right, and Nesreen, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Regarding the sandbox, can you take us through the sandbox? Is there are already some example, like already existing course where we can practice some of these different features, or we have to build the course ourselves and try these different things we are going to learn during this week?
Yeah, so your sandbox course will be a completely empty course where you can build anything you like. So we don't pre-populate it with any content in there. We just give you a course so that you can practice changing topic names or adding activities. It doesn't need to necessarily look pretty or actually make any sense to anyone but you. So it's really just a place where you can practice as much as you want because you can't break anything and you're the only one who's in there looking at that course.
Okay. And the main purpose of this sandbox will be used also to create the project at the end. So we'll be creating the project in the sandbox, right?
You will, yep. And we'll give you instructions about how to send us a link to that sandbox where you create that final thing for us so that we can look just at that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Looks like Latera. Go ahead, Latera.
Hi, I was just wondering where we would locate the sandbox at.
So if you have already created one, and if you haven't created one yet, you're going to come into the course, come down to Course Essentials, and click this link here. There's a page that says create your own practice course is what it says.
Okay.
And then in there, you'll click the button to request a sandbox. It'll take 10 or 15 minutes. And then once it's created, you should find it right on your dashboard.
Okay. I must not have, because I thought I had, but I couldn't find. Oh, I guess never mind. It's there.
It will temporarily take a little bit longer. We have a plugin behind the scenes that's meant to just auto approve any request that comes in. It looks like that plugin's misconfigured right now. My guess is because it's a little out of date and needs an update. So I'm just manually approving them when they come through. So I've updated the language. Just if you give us up to 2 business days, it'll definitely be done by then.
Okay, sounds good. That. Thank you.
But
that's what I get
if
for
it was
updating
already
that
requested. Site. Yeah, if it was already requested, then I just approved those a couple minutes ago. And
okay.
if you haven't requested one yet, go ahead and request it now, and I'll be hanging out and looking for those for at least the next half hour or so.
Right. And now I've got to go give the admins the business because they updated the site and didn't tell me there might be a problem with the plugin. That's their role. They tell us if they think there's going to be an issue. All right, good to know. Makes sense why no one has a sandbox yet. Everyone was asking. And I was like, did we not? Maybe we didn't cover it. All right. Anything else we can answer for anyone today? All right. If not, feel free to hop off. I hope you have a wonderful week. If you have any questions about any of the content that you see this week, please let us know. And again, if there's something that you're hoping we're going to cover and we haven't yet, send us a message and we'll see what we can do to add that into that final week there. We want to make sure that you're walking away with the things that you need. So if there's anything you need, reach out to us. Otherwise, have a great week. Stacy, if you want to hang out, I can meet with you after. Nesreen, was that a new hand up that you just, yeah.
Oh, I think you're muted again.
Yeah, I'm muted. I'm mixed between Zoom, Google Meet, and all this kind of softwares. What I'm going to ask about H5P, if we want to create a content inside Moodle and the sandbox, we have to create it outside and then import it into the system, or directly inside Moodle we can do that? I remember that you said you will go under the content and from there we can add it, but I lost the connections how we can integrate it within Moodle. Can you just?
Yep. So once you create it in your content bank, you'll then come back out to the course, turn your editing on, go to add an activity or resource, pick H5P. So this is, similar to adding other things. But when you get down here to this thing called package file, you'll click on this icon and choose that you're adding from the content bank. And then you'll just look for the item in there. And then you will click on it and then you can add it right from there.
Okay. No.
All right.
It's clear. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is my last question for
Okay.
today.
It was a
Thank
good question.
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Okay. Thanks. See you next week.
Okay. Bye, Nasreen.
Hi, Amy.
Hey, Stacy.
I'm so glad I'm taking this course.
Oh, I'm glad.
It's nice because I don't know if you remember, I was telling you that I've been doing all of this for a year and I really don't have a background in it. So I navigated my way through it and I've learned a lot doing that. But it's nice to actually have some clarity. I'm like, okay, I know what that is. That's good. So, yeah. So I was going to show you some of what the previous teacher did.
Yep. Let me stop sharing and then you should be able to share out.
Okay. So.
And actually, let me stop recording too. Let me find that.
Oh, sure.
Stop.